the Story Grows. I'm Brian Patton. Today we welcome Joe and Sam from UK Metalcore band Shields to the podcast. Shields released Death and Connection last Friday, January 30th, with Long Branch Records. We deep dive into this new record, talking about the musical exploration and diversity on the album, the trials and suffering that led the band to reunite and inspired the lyrical ideas, the art design concept, and so much more. This was such a fun conversation with Joe and Sam, and I hope you guys enjoyed a lot. Thanks so much for checking out this episode of As the Story Grows. If this is your first time listening to the podcast, welcome. Glad to have you here. You can find links in our show notes or at asthestorygrows.com for our mailing list, our Discord server, and our Patreon page, where $1 a month will get you early access to every episode. And I would like to shout out our sponsor for the month of February, Tapehead City, tapeheadcity.com. If you're a cassette head like me, this is where you can get your cassette fix. If you like metal, they have metal cassettes. If you like hardcore, they have hardcore cassettes. If you like punk rock, new wave, noise, jazz, country, they have cassette tapes for you. You can go pick up a cassette copy of Refused, The Shape of Punk to Come. You can get Bad Religion, Suffer, two classics in the punk and hardcore scene. Go check out tapeheadcity.com. A link to the website will be in the show notes as well. Enjoy today's conversation with Joe and Sam from Shield.
I just said it's a pleasure to meet you, mate.
Oh, it's a pleasure to meet you too. This record, I'm gonna jump into this record because it took me by surprise. So I was on a run, and like whatever album I was listening to finished, I popped on your record, and I felt I made a mistake because This Is Not a Dream is such an uncomfortable opener. It is so heavy and dark, and I was like, no, I can't do 40 minutes of this. Like. and then when Abuser comes on, I was like, holy fuck, like just like punched in the face, like completely changed my perspective. I was like, at that moment I was like, I gotta talk to this band. This record is doing so much right out the gate. Like it's incredible. So like I'm sure there's a lot of history here, but let's talk about this record and kind of putting it together and kind of that track flow and like, you know, what do you hope to accomplish?
I mean, the main points of intention that we had in going into writing this album were actually very simple and very few, which made the process very easy to create a large and diverse body of work, which we then able to narrow down into Death and Connection. But the main running theme that we had in our writing process was, is this idea one that we enjoy? Do we like it? Yeah. And if the answer is yes, then let's explore it and elaborate on it, because we were really determined to write a record that we wanted to hear, as opposed to what we thought old Shields fans wanted to hear. And of course, what we were doing before was very much like quintessential metalcore, loads of fun to play, but it was very much of that genre and very easy to pinpoint. And I think we decided to not tie ourselves down to anything other than what we thought was good. And that's where we landed. You know, there were some tracks like This Is Not a Dream you mentioned, which were not really written for the record in the first place. There were some other tracks that were written years and years and years ago that, we had no intention of being a Shields thing, but we were able to kind of pull them out of our own personal back catalogues of songs we had and ideas we hadn't used and elaborate on them because we liked them. It was a really healthy and exciting time to be creating.
Yeah. Samuel, as a guitar player, did that excite you because you're just like, oh, I got, Abuser, which is this like fucking deathcore song that is going to kick people in the head right away, versus like some really beautiful melodic moments later in the record?
I'll easiest way to answer that would just be kind of just to tail off what Joe was saying. Like our first album, Life in Exile, like Joe said, was very just straight up metalcore for the most part. And in the 5 years between our long hiatus and deciding to do the band again and write a new album, Joe and I were very much of the opinion that let's not hyper focus on what's necessarily like the most trendiest like subgenre of metal right now. let's just make something that we both really fucking enjoy and that we think is authentically awesome and that we are excited about, because I feel like fans of any band or just music listeners in general can see through like a band who are just making something that's current for the sake of like going viral or whatever. And every artist, every band, every singer, every painter wants their work to be appreciated and validated and enjoyed and to be successful. But ultimately, like, it's art, what we do, and it has to come from, in my opinion, it should come from a place that's authentic and real. And the 5 years that we'd been broken up, Joe and I lived a lot of life. We both were in long-term relationships. I was married, Joe was engaged, and both those relationships came to an end. And the thing that ended our band was our guitarist, one of our members, sadly passing away. And so a lot happened in that time. And so we had a lot of we had a reservoir of inspiration for writing. Aggressive and music from places of not just like trauma and stuff, but mainly. And, like with This Is Not a Dream. I mean, I think Joe should talk about this more, but I'll just jump in and quickly and say, like, this room I'm sat in right now is my little, like, it's my little studio, but it's very much also like a HQ for Shields. And Joe spent like a lot of time here with me. And we spent about 4 months in this room making this album, just the writing process. I'm leaving out then the months we spent editing and like mix revisions and all that kind of stuff. And Joe would spend a lot of time here staying around. And there was one evening where Joe was up to like 4 a.m. and he just one shot that whole thing. He built all the synths, the whole track. He had these, I think Joe wrote the lyrics that night as well, and then recorded that performance. And then the next day, the next evening, Joe was like, "Hey dude, I wrote this thing last night. I don't know if I want to put it on the album, but it's pretty intense. I just want to show you just for the sake of showing me." And he, as honestly as it sounds right now, it was pretty much in that shape at that point. It was kind of like one and done. There was some very minor additions where I was like, oh, it would be cool if there was like maybe a delay here or there, or maybe if you cut this into that moment and brought it back in. But other than that, like, it was done. And Joe played it for me. And I was like, dude, not only should this be on an album, this needs to start the album. This is such a, like you said, it's such a dystopian, dark, like it's such a curveball from what you might expect from a band like Shields, to then go into the complete juxtaposition as Abuser, which is like a fifth of the length and is just an assault. And that was that once we Abuser as a song, because you mentioned that, I think that was just, I wanted to, that's my wheelhouse of taste, like incredibly like over the top, extreme, like genty, technical, hardcore breakdowns and bends and all that. I love that kind of stuff. And I remember I had written that track fairly quickly. It was one of the first things I wrote when we were doing the album. And it was before Joe had written This Is Not a Dream. I remember thinking, like, dude, imagine we start with this, and then with less than a moment for you to take a literal breath in the recording, we're then just straight into this. And I think we wanted this album to be, one thing that I've seen across a few of the music videos, like YouTube comments, is people going, man, I got to hear this album because like every song is so different. And that was very much our intention. I personally didn't want any song that followed the song prior to be even close to the same realm, or at least have something that really made it identifiable or like stand apart. And that's what we set out to do. I think that's what we accomplished. And I feel like you can see that from the single choices we've done as well. And I mean, that's kind of, it was, we just wanted to make something that was, I really wanted this album to feel like timeless. I would want you to be able to listen to this in 5 years and be like, fucking hell, this is cool. Do you know what I mean? And genres and trends and what's cool and what's not cool, like, moves quicker than ever these days. And I feel like you can either try and be a band that just keeps up with that and, like, writes music that is as popular as the latest hot thing, or you can just stick to writing what feels right to you and what excites you, and there will always be someone to listen to that, I think. Do you know what I mean?
Well, I mean, the music industry from Life in Exile to right now is so different all around, where if you write an album where every track is different, that plays differently for streaming algorithms. And obviously people are like, we want to hear the record. Talk to me about trying to figure out the sequencing to the record. because I stick with the 2 songs mostly because of the diversity in feelings, the like uncomfortableness, the like, why would a band choose to this as their opener? Like, but it sets a stage and tone for, I think, everything that follows lyrically.
So you said the sequencing. What could you elaborate what do you mean by that?
Just the track order of the album, like choosing which song to
track
put there.
list.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. The track list took a little while to get in place because it wasn't obvious which track necessarily should come after the other, given how diverse the tracks were.
Yeah.
Obviously, Sam had the idea to put "This Is Not a Dream" at the start and then go into "Abuser," which kicked off the album and felt right for us. We knew we wanted something at the end that really felt like the album was being brought to a halt, and I think "Miss Me" does that. I mean, the way I kind of like to see the album is, I mean, for me, the shape of an album is what makes it listenable. For instance, I really like Linkin Park's new album. I think the songs on it are great, but it took me a long time of listening to it quite a few times before I enjoyed the album as a full piece of music. Love the individual songs, but it just kind of goes, but, stop. And that for me doesn't feel like a comfortable experience in terms of, it's like a movie that only has one kind of scene and then ends.
Yeah.
For us, I think it was a very important part of the process to create a shape to the album that kind of came up in some areas and came down in others. And so, bringing stuff like in Brothers Lament, that was a really nice interlude, but also transition into Red and Green, and Loser that goes then into Death and Connection as well, the title track. It feels like it kind of like starts off here, moves up, ramps down, and then moves up again for the end, and then has a nice diminuendo with Miss Me at the end of the album. The way I kind of like to see it is it's a bit like, the end of the Lord of the Rings film. They throw the fire in the ring, they throw the ring in the fire in the Mount Doom, but
throw
then
the fire in the ring.
for fire on the ring. They throw the ring in the fire, but then there's the whole ending. And because you've gone through such a huge journey with those characters, the ups and the downs and every which way you could imagine, you need that space just to decompress after the big finale. And I think that's kind of what Miss Me is after Death and Connection. Death and Connection literally feels like at the end of it, it feels like you're just, you've been dropped at the gates of Mordor and you're met with just like destruction and guitars and the opera in the middle of it. And we couldn't have ended the album like that, I don't think, without a decompression period. And so Miss Me kind of fit into it. So we had no real idea of what the structure was going to be until we had all the songs to see which ones could shape it in that way.
Yeah.
I feel like Death and Connection could have ended the album because it would, but I also think it would have felt like maybe a typical ending. And we on Life in Exile, there's actually like a similar, not in terms of like, no, there is a similar song in Life in Exile called Akigahara, which ends the album. It's fairly similar length and has a fairly similar arc in its energy as well. But we'd already had an end to an album like that, where it's like a 5-minute metalcore epic.
Yeah.
And I feel like, it's almost like, I wasn't a massive fan of how Stranger Things concluded, but you know how I don't know if you've seen it, but there's this huge, the whole of that season builds and builds and builds into this epic finale where you have this, spoiler alert, massive battle between the Mind Flayer and Vecna and all the kids who are now emerging adults and all the various main cast members, and they finally have this big victory. And then the ending is kind of the aftermath of that. And Miss Me is very much, I think, it's weird. In some ways, like, this album is chronologically telling a bit of a story backwards, because Miss Me was written just after George passed away, and it wasn't long after that when Shields came to our initial, what we thought was the end at that point, which is then ended up being this long hiatus. And everything else throughout the album is stuff that's happened really in me and Joe's lives in between the point in which we're writing the album and Shields coming to an end. And so I quite like how the juxtaposition of we end with the start, in a sense, and melodically, and not melodically, sorry, but like musically, like it's sort of like your sonically, it kind of gives you, I think it's interesting to me how this album starts on this incredibly dark, minor, gritty, sort of acrid almost tone, and then it literally ends in the major key.
Yeah.
off the end of, you know, a song which is about, you know, one of the most harrowing experiences of my and Joe's lives. And I think I enjoy juxtaposition in music, and I think Joe does as well. And for me, like to answer more specifically your question about the track listing, again, for me, we were sort of just writing this music. We weren't writing songs like this will be the start, and this, with the exception of This Is Not a Dream and Abuser, we were just writing songs that we thought were really fucking good. And we thought we got quite a lot of heavy songs. Maybe we need a song that's a bit more in this realm. But other than that, there wasn't too much thought behind it. It's like whatever naturally we felt like we wanted to write is what we spewed out. And then we had more songs written that would have potentially gone on this album than that went on. So it was a little bit like putting like a jigsaw together at times when we were figuring out the track listing, but because the songs were all written with the same sort of with the same sort of atmosphere of feeling, like it all slot together very nicely. And we didn't really have it wasn't much of a conversation. Like I think we sat down and we had these songs and we kind of put them down together in an evening or a day, kind of sat on it and listened to it, and maybe minus like a couple, I couldn't even tell you what they were because they were so minor. Maybe like maybe we'll swap these two around, I'm not sure. But basically it honestly, it was the making of this album was only difficult because writing an album is a voyage in of itself. But it was smooth in terms of like writing the songs, giving each other feedback on what we thought about the songs, putting together the track listing, deciding what the vibe of the artwork was going to be. There wasn't much conflict or friction between Joe or I, and then Ali and Chris, who eventually joined the band as well, and Larry, who sadly left our band before the album came out, but was in the band while we were writing the album. There was never really much of this going on. We really, for those just listening to this, I'm rubbing my fists together. It was smooth, and we were very much all on the same page, I think, the whole time. So it came together, honestly, like very easily. It all just slotted into place very nicely.
Nice. What led you guys back to Long Branch for this release?
Well, the question is what led them back to us.
Okay.
We came back and we announced this. No, we weren't even announced it. We were booked to do a show after years of not being in a band, and we were booked to do this show at the festival called Burn It Down Festival, they're a small festival, indoor festival in Torquay in the south of England, but they've had some pretty big names in there. And in the same venue, despite not being a big venue, they've had acts like Enter Shikari on the festival. There was Bob Vylan, there's been Static Dress. Loath were booked one year, but weren't able to make it, unfortunately. And this festival booked Shields to come back and do a one-off show. And somehow, I'm not even sure how they really got hold of the information that Shields are back, because we weren't announced. Maybe we'd alluded to posting a little few things, or
we'd started teasing Bury Me.
We'd started teasing stuff, right? So we had started writing again and started teasing things, not announcing anything, not announcing any shows or music. But Long Branch obviously saw this and contacted us and said, we want to continue working with you on the next couple of albums as per the old contract that we had together. And we had a little chat about it in a meeting with Manuel at Long Branch, and decided that this is something that we also want to continue doing, which is working with our old record label.
That's awesome. That's cool. Death and Connections, the name of this record, it's the track. The death I get, you could almost, given the conversation, it almost feels like death and reconnection for the band. But talk to me about that title and how that fits the vibe of the record outside of the trauma and heaviness of everything.
Well, I think that there was two things in my mind. One, I personally wanted it to just be an appropriate title. There was a conversation I think, Joe, we had about maybe when we were kind of, me and Joe were kind of discussing like, you know, how to name the album, and like, you know, our first album's called Life in Exile. And I kind of wanted to have something that felt somewhat sequel-esque, but without like necessarily like, the only thing I really wanted to connect to our previous album was the fact that it's still Shields and it's our next album. In and of itself, this new album is very much Shields point two. And I liked the idea of, you know, we had Life in Exile. And I was thinking, well, what are the direct opposites, or what are the juxtapositions, or what's the next stage after, you know, these words? Like, it's obvious, but after life, there's death. And exile is quite literally the opposite of community and connection. But I also and I remember Joe saying to me, like, it also needs to like resonate with the topics of these songs, and it needs to be part of this release. And I mean, really, Death and Connection as a title, it just captures what this album's about. And death, you know, where it was the death of loved ones, the death of relationships, and the death of connections, basically. And you're right, like this album was in of itself a big reconnection for me and Joe as friends. Not that we ever fell out, but like as like musical partners, so to speak, and bringing Shields back into the scene and back into the musical world and of touring and playing shows again and being even out in the jungle that is Instagram and all that kind of thing. And for me, I liked the idea of it feeling like a part 2, like a sequel. But other than that, like I didn't want our album title to be, I wanted it to be, this is one of my favorite words, I wanted it to be a braviloquent album title. I didn't want there to be any fat you could trim from the edges. It is what it says it is, and it accurately represents what the album's about. And I love leaving room for interpretation as well. We have one of our oldest, and probably to this day still one of our most popular songs. We have a track called I Just Feel Hate, and that is a song about my grieving process and my emotions for my mother passed away when I was a teenager. But what's interesting is that I remember there were comments, there's loads of comments on that music video, but one of them was about someone saying how they deeply connected with this song because of they had a breakup with a long-term partner, and they felt they really the lyrics and the song really resonated with them, even though the song's not about a relationship ending. In that sense, I love the fact that one can connect with the piece of music and find meaning in it, which wasn't necessarily its intention, and have a multifaceted reach in that way. And I feel like that's always been an intention with Shields' music, is our music is always about like the deepest and the darkest and the most emotionally charged topic matters and experiences in our lives. And yeah, I think I don't really know how else I could get into that on the Death and Connection list. Joe, you have anything to contribute on that?
I mean, the album Death and Connection is, we didn't realize that these are the main topics we're writing about, but it encapsulates, it's an album written about the people that no longer hold physical space in our lives, whether that's through the deaths of our friends or loved ones, or it's to do with the connections we've made, which are the connections we made that we spoke about in this album primarily were our, relationships. But connection is also encapsulating the connection we have with the people that we've lost physically. So I think it was, as Sam said, it fit the theme of the album that we had just ended up writing about. We didn't plan that. And it also was a very clever way of making it the opposite of Life in Exile. So 2 in 1. I guess that's what I'd add to that.
Nice. I really dig the album artwork for this album, and from the time you released Abuser and started putting out the singles, you had that kind of visual aesthetic. Who came up with the concept for the album artwork?
I did, but I am not I'm not adept at Photoshop or like drawing in particular. We went with an artist called Dan Barkle, who's insanely talented. His clientele list is endless. He was the mastermind behind the Obsidian artwork for North Lane. Nice. He also has done some stuff for Bring Me. He's worked on some big companies like Nike. He's done some amazing tour posters you've probably seen as well. He did some work for some contemporaries of ours, cool band called Envisions too. And I've just always really dug his stuff. It's kind of it's very modern, but it feels very him. And he works in all kinds of old archaic stuff often into his work as well, which I really enjoyed. And I remember the Obsidian artwork for North Lane I was really into. And I had a concept for the Life in Exile artwork, which we didn't end up going with, where we just had like a shield. Okay. The artwork that we tried to do for that, we ended up scrapping, and we went with the sort of Gregory Crewdson style, like still life vibe. But for this, I was like, I really wanted it just to be a shield, or at least some kind of symbol or something. And I sent, I talked to Joe about it, and I sent I sent what was just the demo form of our album to Dan, and I kind of described the things that we liked, and I kind of pitched this idea of having this sheet, just having like some kind of shield or some kind of embodiment of shield as like the centerpiece of this artwork. And we discussed things that we liked, like films and music and everything. And he basically presented a pitch with various ideas. And in and amongst this, he had all these wonderful ideas of these stone tablets and various things. But one of the things he pitched was this sort of like, there was just this image of this broken piece of glass with like flora and colors in it and stuff. I remember seeing that, like, thinking, that's really fucking cool. And we basically asked him to roll with that, which, good timing, presented us with this, which I don't know if you can see. No, you can't see shit because it's reflected. But yeah, and we ended up with this sort of, what I like about our artwork is it looks like a mistake. It looks like this broken thing, and it resembles a shield without being one. Yeah. But it's beautiful, and it's kind of falling apart and looks like it's a chunk out of something, but it is this beautiful, strong, just about holding together thing. Yeah. And I think visually it very much captures again like the vibe of this album. It's kind of ugly, but it's also like it's something that you can just keep looking at and you notice these different things. It almost looks like it's a suspended art piece you would see like in a dark gallery or something. And then because we provide him with all the demos as well as all the lyrics to the songs, and with that he used that to produce all these cool images, like these sort of like mouths of these like overlapping like dogs and wolves like biting, and like these hooded figures, and like one of the lyrics is as I dangled off the clidge edge of the north, which is from This Is Not a Dream. And then we have this, and on the back of the artwork, there's this sort of like, there's these two frames, like church window frames. And there's one where there's this like this lake, and there's these humanoid figures just suspended over like a sea, which is also This Is Not a Dream. And then there's these wonderful like statues and figures and like sort of fraying lips and like eyes. And there's this image of this woman with like hands over her eyes and like coming up around her neck. And it's, he did all the credit goes to Dan. He absolutely crushed it. It was always exciting whenever he would send us updates. Like, but he did it all. He did all the artwork. He designed our new logo. He designed all like the symbolage that we've used in various videos and pieces of content and stuff. And even provided us with like cool custom typography. I don't know what the phrase is, but all these really cool custom fonts for each song, which we could use when we released a single and everything, which we used. It was, we wanted it to be, we didn't have like a specific tone we wanted. We let him kind of like do what he does best, which I feel like if you're going to collaborate with any artist, you're going to them for what they do, and to stifle their ability to explore creatively what they think can bring to the table would just be a mistake. So we really let him take the lead with that. And we ended up with this very kind of gothic, but modern, archaic neo thing, and that's not a very it's not a very good, I'm not doing it justice really, but we were all very happy with the result, and I think it's fucking sick. If I say so myself.
That's cool. It's why I still like owning albums, because like the album artwork on its own is cool, but you're talking about like back cover, and I'm sure the inside booklet, everything is fucking phenomenal and has layers to explore. So
absolutely, it's one of the things I was most excited about, was having this album on vinyl.
Yeah.
The CD also is differently laid out and has some different stuff in it as well. So having the two together meant that I showed my mum the record for the first time the other day. She'd heard like bits and bobs of it, but we sat down and we put the vinyl on the record player. Nice. And we sat down and just listened to it, and she looked at both the CD and the inner sleeve of the vinyl when we were listening. And I brought up like, we sent out a list of descriptions for the songs, like quotes of us describing the songs in short form paragraphs, and I brought that up for her to read as well. And it was a whole amazing experience of like, she was getting into the sticks of the involvement of the album in a way that I guess a lot of people couldn't, but it was a nice experience for to see everything laid out like that, the differences in the CD and the vinyl, and having the real physical thing in our hands.
Nice. Album's out end of this month. You have your release show, and then you have a couple of shows with Via Nova in February. What's the plan after that? Has kind of this new birth of the band changed your approach to touring and playing shows, or are you just kind of waiting to announce things or waiting for the right things to pop up?
Well, we have a few shows to announce. There's a particularly cool London show that we just confirmed, which I can't announced yet, but it will be it will be on June 9th in London. That's coming. We're supporting a band which I'm not allowed to say anything about. We've got this Via Nova run. We have a spattering of shows. We have spattering of shows across the UK. We're looking into like trying to get into Europe hopefully this year and book more tour dates and stuff. And there's some things we are sitting on, but sadly we're just not allowed, which is frustrating. Love to be able to announce stuff ahead of time, but I don't think this interview will drop before those things are announced. But our main focus currently is we have our listening party on the 23rd of January, which is taking place at Blondie's in Clapton in London, which is a free event which everyone's welcome to come to. Then the album comes out on the 30th of Jan. Then we're straight on the road with Via Nova for 4 shows across the UK. And then, I'll be honest, like in and amongst all the shows we have booked that are yet to announce and touring and stuff, we're kind of already pretty balls deep into like writing again. We've got maybe a folder of, I don't know, Joe, like 30 folders that each represent like different demo ideas, and some are fully fledged songs. And we're trying to like be in a position that when this year is through, that when it comes to like we actually have to seriously start thinking about preparing another release, we are in the same, if not a better situation than we were with Death and Connection, where we have a reservoir or a well of ideas to draw from and kind of figure out what that next album will look like.